Today we're going to take a look at a new personal stereo cassette player. Well, I say stereo, let's hope it is. You know, like a Walkman. Stick your cassettes in it, put your headphones on, except this one's got Bluetooth connection in it. Now, it's a bit of a novelty device. I'm not expecting too much, but hopefully it's all right. Although, at the end of it, you probably won't be able to get hold of one. And the reason for that is that this comes from South Korea, and it's only a limited edition collectible type of thing that's available in KT stores, and you actually have to go into a store and buy one of these. It's not a mail order thing. There's around about 169 KT stores, I think, in South Korea, and the reason I've got hold of one is thanks to a viewer, a chap called YoungSung Jeon, who got in touch. He spotted these for sale and he asked if I was interested in having one, and he sent it over. So he's done all the hard work here. So it's inside this box, and along with that he sent me a nice letter as well. It's got the promotional literature that goes with it. He's sent me a calendar in the bottom for 2022, so that's my first 2022 calendar. But here it is in the box. I've yet to unwrap it, so let's have a look. Now I just want to take the foil off this because there's some text on the back here that I want to show you that will be a little bit easier to read without the reflections. Designed by KT, but also manufactured by Inkel, or is it Inkel? I'm not sure how you pronounce that, because that name again is one that's not familiar here in the West. It's a very large electronics company though in South Korea. YoungSung told me his parents had a Inkel hi-fi system. He sent me a picture, I'll just pop that up on screen. Over here in the West though, Inkel products are rebranded as Sherwood, so that might be a name that you're more familiar with. It doesn't stop there though, because at the bottom here it's actually manufactured by JY Audio in China. Right, let's get it open. There's our portable cassette player. It does feel quite lightweight, that. Yeah, but we'll put it to one side. Let's see what else we've got. User manual. Looks like that might be in English as well as Korean. Let's find out. No, it just says user manual. That's the only part of it that's in English. I think we can figure out how to use it though quite easily. Got our batteries in the bottom, so it runs on 2 AA's. Now this is all the other stuff that we get with it over here on the right. Rewind Blossom. Now forgive me, but I'm not into K-pop, so I'm not familiar with the names and things inside here. Now I'm really just interested in the cassette player, but we've got a load of other things here. I've got a book and some stickers and some more stickers and some more stickers, a calendar, some cards with a lot of pictures of young Korean people. I suspect if I carried around a lot of cards of young Korean ladies, the missus would want to know what the heck was going on. And then I've got this thing. What is this? I don't understand. What is Rewind Blossom? I'm going to cut in over myself here now, because thanks to a helpful fella on Patreon, I've now got more of an idea about what this whole thing is about. So the songs that are included on the cassette are cover versions of 1990s Korean pop, and they're performed by contemporary K-pop artists. Now, that was a period considered as the blossom time of K-pop. Hence, we've got this rewind to blossom, and of course those songs back then would no doubt have been played on many a cassette Walkman. Right, back to the video. I'm interested in the cassette player, and let's have a look at that. So I'll just point out a couple of things here. We've got that auto reverse switch at the top there. Next to that, you can choose manually whether you want to play side A or B. Of course, to do that, it's got a pinch roller at either side in here to play the tape in either direction, and also the head in the middle there you can see is a 4-track head. Of course, it just activates the appropriate tracks depending upon the direction the tape's moving in. We've got a rewind and fast forward button. It doesn't sound that exciting, but even back in the 80s, to save money on a cheaper personal stereo, they'd forego the rewind functions. On the side I've got a 3.5mm headphone jack, volume control, Bluetooth sync button. I think there's a little LED in the middle there as well. And at the bottom here there's a switch to choose between Bluetooth speaker or Bluetooth earphones, and another LED at the bottom there for the battery indicator. I actually appreciate the fact that this is using standard AA batteries rather than some built-in rechargeable cell which you can't remove and will one day fail and take the device with it, so that's a positive. Notice also the speakers on this side here. I didn't point that out before. So that's the one that we should be able to use as a Bluetooth speaker, but presumably also it will play back what's on the cassette without you having to use headphones. So now let's put a tape in this. Well, the auto reverse is working fine, but I've got my first concerns about this thing now. The sound, there's a load of wow and flutter on there. Yeah, that really sounds terrible, and it's a shame because I was hoping that this would have been all right. I'm having my hopes dashed now. Piano music is a way to really determine if your cassette mechanism is running at a steady speed. It is especially noticeable if there's any problems because of the sustain of the notes. You'll notice the kind of wobbliness of it. So yeah, it looks like we've got a big wow and flutter problem here. Now, there's a potential that it could get better if I play a few tapes through it. Maybe it'll start to free things up a little bit, make it smoother. I doubt it. I think it's probably just down to the quality of the motor that's been used in here and the plastic flywheel that'll be connected to it. And it's probably the only mechanism they could get hold of, so they can spec everything up as well as they want with Bluetooth and auto reverse and a 4-track head, all that kind of stuff. But if all you can get hold of is this mechanism with this dodgy motor, then they're on a hiding to nothing. But yeah, I'm going to play through a couple of tapes. Hopefully that makes it sound better before I test it with the wow and flutter meter. But before we do any of that, I want to connect it up to Bluetooth to try that feature out. I've noticed something else that's a little bit unusual here. If we just pop this tape in, so this is side A, we've got to take right back to the beginning. So we're popping it in there now, pressing play, and the tape is playing. That's all normal. Nothing going wrong so far, but we want to fast forward a little bit because I left a blank section at the beginning of here. So let's just fast forward. We'll press our forward button there, and now we've rewound back to the beginning of the tape again. If we want to go forward, we have to press the rewind button. So now we're skipping forward. Another couple of quirks I'd like to mention: if you're fast forward or rewinding, the tape will not auto stop once it reaches the end. It's up to you to manually do that. However, the machine does have an auto stop that functions on play, but then again, it only does it once. It's played both sides of the tape. So the auto reverse is always on to play side A and B, irrespective of where you've moved that switch. If you put it on, the auto reverse, it'll play both sides over and over again forever. If you switch it off, well, it'll just play side A, then B, and then stop. Anyway, let's get on and try the Bluetooth out. Okay, well, that's playing fine so far. Now, I've got a switch on the side here. Bluetooth speaker or Bluetooth earphone, so I've got it in that earphone mode. I'm going to hold down that button there. I'd imagine that's going to activate the sync for the earphone, and it's flashing and the audio's gone off. So let me get my headphones out. Yeah, those are working fine. Let me just put the microphone closer. Nice to be able to just have a wireless connection to your headphones. But now let's get on to that wow and flutter issue. So what I'll do, we'll put another cassette in here. I'm just going to play it through. I think I'm going to play it through a couple of times. In the end, I ran the machine in for a total of 6 hours over a couple of days, just to make sure it was running at its best before capturing the audio. And of course, then that was done with new batteries in it. But I'm going to play a section on one of my older Walkman models and then alternate between them. So we'll start with that one, but bear in mind that this is a 22-year-old machine. It's been sat in a drawer unused for a year or so, so it's probably not performing at its very best. Now, depending upon how you're watching this video, you may have noticed the newer player's audio was in mono, and that's just because one of the channels kept cutting out due to a faulty headphone jack, so I had to use the one channel that was consistent throughout. I'll also mention that whilst I was using a Type 2 tape, it was recorded with Type 1 equalization to be compatible with both machines. I'd originally tried using a Type 1 tape for the demo, but I just kept getting loads of dropouts on it, so that SA90 gave better results. However, from listening to that, I'm sure you can hear the tonal differences and speed irregularities. We'll get a measurement on those later, but first I need to go into a bit of research to the modern day personal stereo market. You see, when it comes to cassette Walkman models, I'm spoilt for choice. This picture shows just a few of them. I bought a few more since then, and as a result of having all these, I've never had the need to go looking at what's out there new now. I just assumed they were all rubbish, and that's all I needed to know. But now I felt I'd need to find out exactly what was going on, why the machine I was reviewing wasn't any better. Well, I'm sure you've seen these cassette to MP3 devices over the years, and this particular model had auto reverse just like my Korean machine, and then there's this one as well which has both the auto reverse and the Bluetooth that's on mine, so pretty much the same specs without the speaker. But then take a closer look at the button layout and it's exactly the same as the one on mine. The play button on the front, the auto reverse button behind it, an on-off slider for that feature next to that button, and all the rest of the transport controls are in the same positions too. And that's because these machines are using the exact same mechanism as one another. They might have slightly different features in there, for example a USB port or a Bluetooth speaker, but when it comes down to the main component, the tape transport, well, it's identical. So all this business about designed by KT, manufactured by Intel, sent off to some company in China, well, it's all overblowing it a bit. It's more like they just chose a case design and got some company to assemble an assortment of off-the-shelf components into that case. Now, I don't want to give the impression that there's just the one personal stereo cassette mechanism floating around, because after looking at them, I've managed to identify a few different ones, although they are quite similar to one another. So first off, we've got the one that's in my machine and in those MP3 converter things. The section you can see behind the plastic cutout, that's all metal. There's very little plastic on show, just the two pointed black plastic legs that are located either side of the head that then locate through the holes in the bottom of a cassette. So that's the first mechanism, used in a number of devices, including the one that I've got. But now let's have a look at another one. In this player, there's more black plastic on show in that same section that wasn't in the first one. But perhaps the most recognisable feature of this particular mechanism are the visible cogs that are poking through in the centre there. And notice how those again aren't present on that first mechanism. Now that won't be because those toothed wheels are covered over by the case. Take a look at this third auto reverse mechanism I spotted for sale that claimed to be for personal stereos as well. Now this one relocates those cogs to the other side. This one might be old stock being sold off though, because I haven't spotted this particular mechanism being used in any newly assembled machines. I'll just point out a couple of differences from this one to the other two. This one's got a significant use of black plastic again that's on show, but also has this centre metal piece that starts off behind the head and travels up through the centre of the mechanism as a column. So now if we jump back to the one in my player, you'll see that the layout there is quite different in that regard. But every personal stereo cassette player I've managed to find detailed pictures of appears to be using either one of those first two mechanisms. And most importantly, that also goes for any newly launched players. The things that turn up on Kickstarter or Indiegogo that claim to be bringing cassettes back with a brand new cassette player. Well, as far as the mechanism goes, they just seem to be using an off-the-shelf component. So, for example, the It's OK player was really just a quick repackaging of an existing mono dictation machine, but that also used that second mechanism, the one with the visible cogs. And then there was the Mystic, which at the top there claims to be a next generation portable cassette player. Well, again, the prototype for that one used that same mechanism as well. Now, there is another player that's been doing the rounds for a while, but I've only ever seen renders of this. I'm not sure it even exists or ever will do, but if they do manage to bring it to market, I'd be shocked if it doesn't include one of the existing budget mechanisms. So all these devices are only ever going to be as good as their weakest components, and it appears that the only personal stereo cassette mechanisms available nowadays give a very low-end performance. It'd be madness, therefore, to expect that any new device that uses one of these will be significantly better than another, when pretty much they're all cut from the same cloth. And purely going on the amount of metal that's used in the mechanism here, I've got to assume that this would be the higher end one from the models that we've identified. So let's get some test measurements in for it. Now, bear in mind, again, this machine has been running for at least 6 hours, and the results are, after all that it was running at least 3% fast. It pegged the needle. It could go quite a bit beyond there. But looking over to the Wow and Flutter on the right, that varied a lot during play, but regularly hit numbers up to 0.7%. So these are perhaps the worst results I've ever had from a cassette player, one that wasn't actually properly broken. And of course, as you heard earlier, those fluctuations were extremely noticeable during music playback. And by comparison, my old Walkman, which I've never opened up, never replaced the belts, never serviced, it was running 1% fast and it achieved around about 0.15% Wow and Flutter. And on most days those would be pretty unremarkable results, but when compared against that new machine, it's night and day. Okay, so going on the premise that these modern day mechanisms that are used here and in other devices similar to this are rubbish, and we don't want a device that has one of those mechanisms in it, how do you spot the mechanism? Well, there's a couple of things to say. First off, just look at the thickness of this. That mechanism is a chunky old thing, and therefore you can't make a nice compact case around it. And that goes for the other mechanisms that are similar to this as well. So, how big is this? Well, let me get a couple of cassette cases here, a couple of SA90s in the boxes. And if we put those things side by side, well, basically it's about the thickness of 2 cassettes, a little bit thicker than that. And if we just get one here, it is longer in that dimension than a cassette in the box as well. So that gives you the idea as to how big these things are going to be, and there's no way to make a small device that holds a mechanism like that. Now, if I just get one of the anniversary Walkmans out here, I've got a couple, they're roughly the same size as each other. I'll just pick this one in my left hand. So SA90 against that. It's roughly the same size in that dimension. That's of course a cassette in its case again, and roughly the same in that dimension as well, give or take a couple of millimeters. So yeah, if anyone was to bring out a new modern day Walkman and it was the size of a cassette, I'd be very, very impressed, but I don't think that's going to happen either. Now, if we just look for some more telltale signs to avoid this mechanism, well, first off, see the motor there? It's running flush with the back of the case, so they obviously can't get this motor any deeper down inside this case. Now, all the ones I've seen, all the modern day mechanisms, they all have the motor on display. Now, this has a nice clear front on it, so you can see it. But in any other, just look down the door there, you'll be able to see. And I'd suggest if the motor's on display, it means it's using one of these awful mechanisms. And then finally, we've got the buttons. If a modern day Walkman is using these clunky buttons like this, well, again, this mechanism has to use those. That's the only way it operates. It's mechanical. So if you've got mechanical buttons that you have to push down in a chunky case with a motor on display, you've got a variety of this. And unfortunately, in my opinion, and I'm sure in the opinion of lots of others, these things are just awful and a waste of money. Now, just again, going back to one of these, we've got touch buttons here, and if we were to open this up, you can see here we don't have a motor on display because Sony, believe it or not, knew how to manufacture things and hide motors away in a nice slim case like this. And we've got the 4-track head, and notice that's in the door there, and that's to save space as well. So Sony knew what they were doing when they made these. People putting these things together are just getting some generic parts off the shelf, sticking it in a case and making something that's absolutely terrible, but as bad or as good as everyone else that's doing the same thing. Now, in the past, whenever I've reviewed something that turns out not to be all that good, I'll get a load of people thumbing down the video. For some reason, they don't like somebody giving them accurate information about something that doesn't work very well. But that's exactly what's happening here. I'm just telling everybody to avoid things like this because you will be disappointed if you buy them. And if anyone in the future ever does come out with a new Walkman and says it's an all new design that they've come up with themselves, just be very wary. Look for those telltale signs that really they've just bought some components off the shelf and stuck them in a slightly different case to anyone else. So there you go. That's the truth of the matter. don't go buying yourself a new personal stereo cassette player. Certainly not this one from South Korea, but since it's the same model that you can get anywhere else with a slightly different case, then my suggestion is don't go buying it from anywhere. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.